Hi, I'm Jarrod Hardke, Rice Extension Agronomist for the University of Arkansas System, Division of Agriculture.
And I'm Chlapecka, PhD Graduate Research Assistant with the Division of Ag.
I'd like to welcome you to today's episode of Rice and Advice. We're at a furrow-irrigated rice field in Arkansas County where we have set up a nitrogen response trial in furrow-irrigated rice so we can take a closer look at best nitrogen management in a furrow-irrigated rice system on a Grand Prairie silt loam. Let's go have a closer look. Here we are at our nitrogen response plots at the upper end of the field. What we can tell is definitely the drier end here in furrow-irrigated rice. It's still moist and tacky at this upper end, but certainly nowhere near a standing flood in this area. And so now we're going to have Justin take us through some of the nitrogen treatments that are in the upper end of this field on a Grand Prairie silt loam. And this field is on a hybrid cultivar. That's what the majority of our nitrogen work is on so far, because that is our primary recommendation, is to grow a hybrid on furrow-irrigated rice. Other non-hybrids can be grown successfully, but may not be as stress tolerant, so our focus to date has relied on hybrids for nitrogen response. So let's get in and have a look at the treatments.
So right now I'm standing in front of our zero nitrogen check. So obviously zero nitrogen was applied and we would not recommend that in any situation. You can see that it does have an overall yellower appearance compared to the other plots, as well as being shorter in stature and also being further along in the grain filling period. You can see the panicles are tilting down pretty well in this particular plot, whereas in our other plots which have received fertilizer, they are not tilting down near that much, and the grain fill period has really just started. So as we move on into our other treatments, this here would be our single pre-flood, which will be 120 pounds of N per acre on a silt loam soil following soybean. And you can see here we have a much greener appearance. We have a much longer flag leaf, as well as a kind of a thicker canopy, as you would expect. And then as we move into, this would be a two-way split. So what we did was put 60 pounds of N per acre out at the 5-leaf stage. And then we followed that with another 60 pounds of N per acre about 2 weeks later. And you can see that we really do not see much of a difference between this treatment and the single pre-flood, which is what we've seen on many of our silt loam soils. However, we have seen on some that there can be a significant yield increase by splitting that nitrogen up, as many as 20 to 30 bushels per acre in certain situations. Okay, so now we've moved to the range of plots directly behind the first set that we looked at. And this treatment here focuses on that same pre-flood rate of 120 pounds per acre split into two ways, just as the last plot that I showed did. However, we do add an additional application at 21 days after that first application, which would be a week after the second split, and that's another 46 pounds of nitrogen per acre. And the reason we do this is to look and see if we need any extra nitrogen on top of that recommended pre-flood rate that we'd have for a flooded rice field. And you can see here that the canopy is maybe a little greener, it's a little thicker, and that it's also a little behind in maturity compared to the rest by about a day or two. You can see that we have barely any grain fill at all in these panicles, and then also, as I said before, it's got a much thicker canopy on it. This has been our top yielding treatment on some of our clay sites. However, in the silt loam sites, we have not really seen much of a benefit from adding this additional 46 pounds of N per acre compared to our clay soils. As we step back to this next treatment, this is a three-way split, just where we applied 46 pounds of N per acre in 3 separate applications. So that would be 100 pounds of urea per acre for each application, and those were spaced a week apart. And that would be similar to the 120 units. That's going to be 138 units of nitrogen, so 18 more than the single pre-flood recommendation. And what we can see here is that it really looks very similar to all of our other splits, and there's not much of a difference at all in this treatment. And then as we move on to this here, this is a single pre-flood rate, but it is 180 pounds of N per acre, so 50% above what we would normally recommend. So we would expect, again, for this to mature not as quickly as the rest of the plots, and as well also maybe to have a slightly greener color, but we cannot, again, see much of a difference visually than we can in the other plots. And we've also seen that with our data in the previous years that we've done these studies on silt loams, that we really do not see much of a benefit of going with an excessive single pre-flood rate. And then this is the last treatment we will look at today. This is 4 separate applications of 100 pounds of urea per acre, or the 46 units of nitrogen. And those are spaced about a week apart, starting at 5 leaf. And that pretty much extends you all the way to between green ring and half-inch internode, depending on when you actually get started on your nitrogen application. And again, we can see that that is going to have an excessive nitrogen rate compared to the rest of the plots. But again, we do not see much of a difference and not much of a benefit generally by applying these 4 applications of urea.
So in summary, on a silt loam soil, there are a lot of nitrogen strategies that can be successful in furrow-irrigated rice when we're growing hybrids. And whether that's the single pre-flood rate of around 125 pounds of nitrogen per acre, or splitting that into 2 applications of 60 units of nitrogen, or even going with 46 units 3 times a week apart. All of those have looked very good across all of our silt loam sites. The safer approach certainly seems to be to split that nitrogen up some way, just to make sure we avoid any excessive nitrogen loss from a large single application up front to small rice.
And looking at our clays, we see that it's not always the case. Some of these treatments that we've seen today will work on a clay soil. However, we have seen that the outstanding treatment by far has been the 2-way split that we looked at, which will be the 2-way split of the single pre-flood, and then also an additional 100 pounds of urea application about 21 days after that first initial application. This nitrogen is looking at yield and also grain quality to our soils, and to the tune of anywhere from 20 to 25 bushels per acre on average compared to all of the treatments.
We hope you've enjoyed the discussion of furrow-irrigated rice nitrogen application schemes. We'll continue to do this work in the future and continue to summarize these results, including this year, this winter. We've been doing this for several years, so a lot of data to compile and share, and we look to update and share that with you. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Rice and Advice. See you next time. Have a rice day. Thank you to the rice growers of Arkansas for your support through the Arkansas Rice Checkoff Program administered by the Arkansas Rice Research and Promotion Board.